You go first.
You want me to go first? Okay. I'm Kathy Kersy. I'm a 1986 graduate of College of St. Mary. I'm also a Mercy Associate. I've been an associate since 2017. So I grew up on a farm in Iowa. And then my sister actually is also a graduate of the college. So that's how I ended up here. I love the college. I'm still very actively involved. I come to a lot of activities. We have set up a scholarship to support education because education was very important in our family. And I also became an associate just because of the concept of mercy, and that I grew up with that. And my parents weren't particularly Mercy, but they just helped people. And so when I learned more about the Sisters of Mercy, I met Sister Mary Virginia Daly when I was a freshman here, and stayed connected to her until she passed away a few years ago. So it was just that connection. I loved getting known the sisters, and they're such a great group, and just their legacy and how they carry on mercy. As being an associate, I want us to carry that on as well.
I'm Sister Marie Micheletto. I am first generation American. I was born 7 days after my folks came here from Italy. I entered the community. Well, my dad and mom, we lived in a neighborhood where they helped everybody else. We learned that, and we had a Christ Child Center at the end, and so we had Arthur Murray dancing lessons and tap dancing lessons and all these kinds of lessons, and we knew everybody, and and the park was across the street. And when you say, we're going to when do we have to be home? When the lights go on, which one of my heartaches about this now is people can't take their kids to the park unless they've got half the National Guard with them, and I understand why, but we just went, and I was raised without fear, so that after I went to I graduated from Mercy High School. I went to the College of St. Mary. I graduated from there, and from there they sent me to California to teach. And I loved the kids. The kids were wonderful. And they taught me the first thing I needed to know about how I was going to live my life. California is where I went to teach, and I loved the kids. And Tony I was three months in teaching there, and he came up to me and he said, "Sister, do we have to know everything that you know?" And it just came out of me. And I said, "Yes, Tony, and you have to teach me everything that you know that I don't know." And I've remembered that because all the things that I've had a wonderful life, and all the things that I have done is because someone else called me to it. That's how God calls us to a number of things, is they call us to something so that we can give our gifts to other people for the world. So anyway, I love those kids. So the next year, I taught general science. We got to the chapter on engines, and what do I know? I could drive. At those years, I could drive, I could drive, whatever. And he said to me, he says, "Remember what you said last year to me?" I says, "Tony, what did I say last year to you?" And he repeated it, and he says, "So, sister, Jepson and I know that we know more than you do about engines. And so we're asking permission from you to teach. And we will have them write, we will have them read, and we will test them." He says, "If you'll just test, And he said, and I said, "Well, what made you think that?" And he says, "Well, because since we were in sixth grade," and this was sophomore in high school, "when we were in sixth grade, Jepson and I, when they had the races on the mountains around, we were on the team that pulled the engines out, put them in, refit them, whatever." And he says, since you'll be also taking the class because you'll want to learn they will learn from the book that we have on science. You will be reading 2 editions of Hot Rod, and we will choose those editions, and you will be tested on that. Now, have you ever read The Hot Rod? The vocabulary is, you'd have to be an electrical engineer. I mean, anyway, so they tested me. The class did wonderful. They did wonderful. They were whatever. And I did average. But I learned that from those kids is that if you listen, everybody you meet has something to teach you. So anyway, I did that, and then I was there for 3 years, and then I went to Missouri, and that was a different population, a farming population. So that gave me a sense about that. And then Major Superior came and said, the person in charge of education wants you to go to be the principal of the school, because you added so much to the different schools that you went to, whatever, of the high school. And I said, I wouldn't be good at that. She says, what do you mean you wouldn't be good at that? And I says, I wouldn't. I love the kids, but I wouldn't do the program, whatever. That's not what it'll be a waste of your money. She says, well, I'll have to talk to the person in education because she's got you slotted for this. And I said, I'm not going to do it because I know it won't be the right thing. She says, well, what do you want? I says, if I'm going to be with all these kids, and they're in small schools and the public schools don't have counselors and whatever, I need to get some of this because the kids in both of those places had been in a tough situation, and I was the one who talked with them to help them get out of those tough situations. So that's what I really want. And she says, well, I'll have to see. She herself was a social worker, so she got it. Here again, God provided. And as my Jewish friends say, and God knew, when we do Passover together, we say the prayers, we say, and God knew. And God knew. And so I ended up working I ended up being educated out of the Wazoo, the University of Northern Colorado, Manningers, an internship in Oregon, whatever. And I came to work here. And from here, I got to go all over the world, really, literally. One of our a Notre Dame sister, wonderful person, and I wrote a premarital instrument called Focus. And it was used in 11 different countries, and so I would get to go to some of those countries and do this. And then I met people who said, why don't you do this, or why don't you? And I said, well, I don't know if I can. They said, yes, you can, and we need you to go to Australia, so I did that. And I think if there's anything I want to say about that is that we have to listen to what people say because this is how God operates in our life. That I would have never been to those places unless Tony didn't teach me about I needed to listen, And my concern is about the health situation now because I've kept up with the research and whatever, and this book is probably 6 or 7 years, so they're saying the problem with AI in the medical field is it will, faster than any doctor, it will tell you what your disease is, the diagnosis, and what the treatment is. What it will not tell you is that what treatment that person needs to have, because we're so different that they will need different treatments. And doctors are going to have to be trained to ask them, not just to tell them, but to ask them. And so I worry about that, and I'm hoping that people understand that we have to be able to ask questions, and we have to learn from each other which questions to ask. Oh, well, that was when we lived across the street from St. Anne's. They built the church in there, whatever. My dad would go over there during the day because he worked at night, carried luggage for the Union Pacific Railroad. In the daytime, he would go down to the courthouse to help people resettle because he was perfectly bilingual and whatever, into different parts of the people coming in, part of the city, migrating in. And so he would go over there and help them out because he was real handy. And so I met the sisters, and in those early days, I played the accordion, and somebody says, anybody who can play the accordion can read the music to play the organ. So I learned that. Then we had the school, and Sister Margaret Mary was there, and Kathleen Ann. They were people who loved the neighborhood, like we love the neighborhood. And so I did that, and then I went to Mercy High School, and when I thought about what was next, I thought about all the stuff that I knew that those sisters did and what they did in our community that were immigrants. We just didn't talk about it in that way then, it was just, you just came in, and so did everybody else in Omaha came in. We were all immigrants at one time in history. We just forgot that. And so when I went there, and I thought, what am I going to do with all of this? And I didn't think a whole lot about it until I was a senior, and I said to my folks, I think I'm going to join the convent. My dad said, oh, don't do it now. Wait till after you finish college, because he had saved, since he paid the thing, he saved for us to be able to go to college, because he never got to do it. He says, and then I want you to go home to Italy once so that you'll know all the family from there. And I says, Dad, I just didn't feel like I could wait. So I said, Dad, I need to go. And my mother was okay with it. And I says, and if I don't, I can come back if I don't need to, whatever. He said, well, okay. So they all were supportive of it. My dad could never, we only got to visit periodically, because in those days you couldn't go home or you couldn't do any of that. And he could not stay he says, I'll come back. He would get all teary. Now, if you saw my dad, you'd never think about him being teary. He wasn't sad because I was joining. He was sad because I didn't get to do those other things that he had saved for, because he wanted me to be sure I had it, because he didn't have it. So then I went there, and I met wonderful people who also wanted to be there. Some of them were in the class that I had, and some of them left, but they left and they still continued to do wonderful things, because they had been part of the community and they had seen what their talents could do, whether they were in the community or not. So I stayed, and then they sent me, I made my first vows, and then they sent me to California and Marshall, Missouri, and I came back all fired up, and I made my final vows, and I knew that that whatever I did, I would know. And I still do know about that. When I wake up in the morning, I know who I need to pray for. That I knew that, but I don't remember. It's just, everybody has their gift, and we have to use it for, no matter what, we know now, we have critical concerns. Sisters call it the critical concerns. And so we need to have other people who are not in the community, but are associates or in our colleges or in our schools, know what we have to go after, so that everybody has what they need in order to live. And that the world, that we don't destroy our wonderful planet. So I got with all of those, and they all meant something to me. And I knew they meant something to me because people called and asked me to do it. I says, well, I don't do that. I'm trained out of the wazoo to be a therapist, and I can do that. And I can talk with the doctors, and I can see people for nothing, and I can say to the doctors, open up those drawers and get that medicine out, because they can't eat and get the medicine both. So that keeps me fired up, and even though I've given up my practice, I still do that. I still say, you have enough in your practice. I want you to see her or him, check the medication, be sure it's right, and you can do it for nothing. You want to start?
I'll start.
Because we have gotten this, that she knows for me.
So To me, it means carrying on the critical concerns and the mercy charism. And like immigration is important to me. That's part of the reason we're friends. I remember my grandfather telling me how wonderful it was to see the Statue of Liberty when he came to the United States from Czechoslovakia. And that still inspires me today. You know, like Sister said, we're all immigrants. The United States was built on immigrants. And so how important that is to all the people that are coming to our country now. And so just being able to carry on the critical concerns, the earth. I grew up on a farm, so the earth is very important to me. I know what it's like to have your living be from the farm, and how devastating it is when there's, storms and you lose all your crop because of the weather. And so those critical concerns are very important, and we associates want to keep those in the spotlight and make sure that those are carried on. And the mercy charism, caring for people, just doing what is right. Growing up on a farm, you helped each other. You made sure if somebody was needed help with something, you were there. If somebody got sick, all the farmers would get together and help, harvest the crop. That's just how we grew up. That's just what it was. And I see that in the Mercy. When I started hearing about the Mercy, Sisters of Mercy, and the associates, it's like, that's how I grew up. And plus, the Sisters of Mercy are independent. My mother was very independent. She had her own farmland, she had her own money, and that was important to her. And I was raised to be extremely independent. And the Sisters of Mercy, I think, are independent. They're willing to stand up for what is right, say what is right. And Catherine McCauley, who founded the Sisters, is amazing. What she did in her time is just unbelievable. And so we associates want to keep that legacy going. And being an associate allows us to live our lives how we want to live them, but then carry on that charism and the critical concerns. And there's no way we won't be replacing the sisters. It's just carrying on those things so that we all remember them. And also in the colleges and the high schools and things, we want those that are at a Mercy College or a Mercy High School to know that's why they're there. They're there because they have that feeling of mercy that they want to carry on. So.
Well, you said it well. and I have, one of the things that we do because of our critical concerns is that we figure out how we can give some grants to places like this. And so one of the places that I worked for a grant for was the Intercultural Center, which is on 55th, which was an old motorcycle place that they lived in. When I started working with them, they were in different places, and then we ended up, and it was just great because it has wonderful windows. Anyway, what they do is it's for people over 55, and that they, at breakfast, they speak their own language, whatever that might be. A lot of it is Hispanic. Tex-Mex is really what it is. And then the other, at lunch, they speak English. And they have classes for that and whatever. And so when I thought, I'm 86, and I thought one of these days I'm going to die. And by God, somebody has to keep that going. So this is why she gets it. It's not about getting going the Sisters of Mercy. It's getting going the needs of the world that the Sisters of Mercy have said, these are our critical concerns, and let's all work at that. Mm-hmm. And so she's doing that for me. I have introduced her to the person who is the head of that. She volunteers there periodically. She knows, those people know her and she knows her. And Catalina, who is the person in charge of all that, is fabulous. But she knows her, and she knows that if I die tomorrow, she's going to keep that going. She's going to work with that. And that what happens is, I'm sure it's this way a lot, but Omaha is like a small town. Everybody knows everybody. And when I was doing my work in different places and living in different places, I knew a lot of people who were, I always say lovingly, I knew people who were low people in high places. and I could get for my neighbor, I can get you a skill, I can get you into a union, I can do that. And so that you pass that on to other people, and that you get all these connections from everybody when you do that. And so that it is a way, for me it is such a way to know that this is what we do. This is what we do, and this is what we do for my nieces and my nephews and my whatever. I want them to do this kind of thing too, because it's going to make a better world for everybody, not just for the Mercies or for you or for me.
We're all connected.
We're all connected.
And what we do, this little thing we do today, affects everybody. And so we want to carry that on, not just with associates, but with students and the mercy. We all need mercy in the world. We need more of it. And so we want to carry that on. And that's one way that we can do it as an associate.
Yes. We do it person to person to person, because they know for every person, every person that she knows X number of people. And so that connects me with those other people. I don't have to campaign on the thing to say, this is who I am and this is what I do, and so are you going to help me? This is it. We do this by word of mouth about what's important for the world, for those who do not have enough. I have had a wonderful world. We grew up poor, but we never lacked anything because we had the neighborhood.
And that's the same way. I grew up on a farm, with my mom always said, you have old, poor parents, because I grew up on a farm and my parents were in their 40s when I was born. So, and I've been very blessed. I mean, I came here to college and I've had good jobs over the years and been very blessed. I want to repay that back. That's because that's what I saw my parents. That's how I grew up, and I see the Mercies, and so I want to continue in that and to pass that on to the next generation, so that they know if they've been blessed, they pass it on to the next generation. So,
it's as simple and as complicated as I was at Aldi's, and this little boy, he couldn't have been, if he was 5 years old, that was exaggeration, I don't know if he was that old. He ran up to me and he says, lady, can I open the door for you? And that door is so heavy. But I said, oh yes, I would just so appreciate it. And so I opened the door, and he opened the door, and I said, thank you, I appreciated this so much, thank you so much. He says, okay, and he ran back, and this is the joy that it brought to my heart. He says, Daddy, she said, thank you. And she says, thank you so much. And then the dad, they were both laughing, and the dad picked him up and he said, I am so proud of you and I love you. That kid will never forget. See, this is the old therapist in me. That kid will never forget that his dad said, I love you and I'm proud of you. Why do I know that? Because when I do counseling for older men and they do some of the background, they will say, I know my dad loved me because he took care of the family and whatever. He never said, I am proud of you and I love you. So when I do premarital counseling, I always said, this is what you do. You never say to a kid they're bad. You say, in our household, we don't do this. And you say, I'm proud of you and I love you. And you give them a little hug or a little pat on the butt. Just like mom and dad do to each other when they have an argument. I mean, this is how it grows. You see what I mean? It's just, people teach you what you need to do, but you have to listen.
It's the hard part, listening.
Well, I don't know what you're thinking of, but there's justice, and the piece after justice is mercy. It's an extension. Is it a furthering thing? See, in my language, I would say it's how God takes care of us. In AA, they say, you have to let go and let God. And God says, just let it be. I love you. Let it be. Move on. Don't live in the past. Move on. And so it's the extension of justice, I think. It's a step more. And it's not about a Catholic thing. It's a spiritual, we're all spiritual. I helped write something on holistic health and high-level wellness and all that business for insurance companies. And it's one of the 9 things about it is your spirituality. And it's not about a religion, it's about a spirituality. So what you believe about the greater world, and no matter what you call God, you can call him Allah, you can call it Allah, you can call it I've been to a variety of religions and say the same thing. It's just that your heart is bigger than what you hear or what you see in the movies and whatever.
And you care about people. It's
care
just
about them.
about caring. My dad never went to church. I mean, the only time he went to church was if somebody was getting married or like graduation, or he went to church when he was little, but the whole time I knew him, he never went to church. My mom did a lot in the church. She was in Catholic Daughters and Rosary Society, and I helped serve the refreshments after our Mass here at the college on Sundays. I'm like, I've been doing that since I was 5 years old. I was the baby. I went with my mom to all those different things, and that's just what you did. You just helped, if somebody was having an event, a wedding or a reception or something, you just pitched in and helped. That was just what you did. So that's kind of my feeling of mercy. It's just helping others, caring about others, and just continuing it on. It doesn't have to really have even a religious type things. Like I said, my dad really, and he was a farmer, so he would hire people that other people probably wouldn't hire that had mental challenges or whatever, but that was just what he did. That was
how we take care of the earth, how we take care of.
Yeah, and my mom always laughed that when they started talking about conservation and all that, my dad had been doing that for years, rotating crops and that kind of thing. So it was just, it's just kind of a feeling, or, and then caring about people, the earth, the environment, all that kind of thing. So to me, that's what mercy is.
Yes. Really, originally, I'm an old English teacher, that's all right. Nuns were really people who were in cloistered communities, and that they were not like Catherine, the walking sisters. They weren't the people who were out and about.
Sisters, walking nuns.
Yeah, they called them the walking nuns, the people who didn't just live in the convent, and not just, but like the nuns were people, some of the nuns were people who lived in convents, like the Poor Clares. The convent, they might do something inside. They might make hosts, or they might do something, but they don't go out and they don't teach and they don't do those things. Yes, and so when Catherine was doing this, they called the Mercies the walking nuns. Mm-hmm.
Because she wanted to go out and meet the people. That was how she felt drawn. And she didn't become a sister until she was in her 40s, right? Mm-hmm. She grew up, I don't know if you know the story of Catherine Macaulay, but she lost her parents very young, but she remembered her dad helping people when she was 5. And then her mother, unfortunately her dad died, and then her mom died not too much later, and then she went to live with a family, or a couple, and helped take care of the woman. And then when they passed away, they gave her their money, which was like $1 million in today's terms. And she wanted to help the poor, or she wanted to help mostly a lot young girls that couldn't get jobs or that were living in not good circumstances. And so she was just going to have others live with her. And then the religious came like, well, women living together, we probably shouldn't do that. We need to, you need to become a sister. And so she did that, and, and they said also, if you want your legacy to carry on, it would be better to do it as a religious order. And so she wanted to go out and be with the people on the streets, in the hospitals. And that's kind of one thing that's drawn to me. Like I said, my mom was very independent. I was raised to be independent. Catherine Macaulay was definitely very independent, and these sisters are very independent, and they will confront situations that some people would be scared to, or, we don't want to, upset anybody, but these sisters will stand up for everyone, the people that most need that support and courage, and they need that from people. So that's part of what draws me to them too. When I start hearing about them, I'm like, I can be in this group, and I can say something, and everybody's going to pretty much agree. Now, not always, but for the most part. So to me, that's what's unique, is that they're a little spicy, I think is what you said your mom was.
Yes, my mother was that way, and my dad was bright and intelligent, and he just believed that people should have what they needed and whatever. And so even when he was carrying luggage, he was settling people. And he said, now, because of the people he worked with, now the Irish are settling over here and the Polish are settling over there and whatever. And so he'd find somebody to help them settle in. And that's just, they did that just because. It wasn't that they were hired to do that or whatever. You did it because that's what you did for one another.
Yeah, you supported each other. You want to help other people get ahead
Yes.
and do better, and have that opportunity. You know, some people have an easy life. You know, it's not hard. Other people have a lot of struggles, and you want everybody to, you know, have a fair shot of making a good life.
I want to be sure it continues. With or without federal funding or for people or whatever, we have got to continue, because what's happening is the women who come that are from diverse places and whatever, and our sisters who were a part of this, help create the sense that you're in this world not just for yourself, but for everybody else too. And it's not just about money, it's about what we do. You know, it's just like they had on TV, this was a grade school, they said, remember to be kind. I said, what? We have to put it on the wall to remember to be kind? That we need to learn to that, because we have received that. It's paying it forward. You know, it's that old cliche that they have, you know, when they were getting a cutting coffee and the guy says, you know, I'll pay for me and I'll pay for the one behind me. And so people pay forward the kindness they have received and whatever. So it's important, I believe it's important to notice, to remember, to put together again the ways that people have been kind, have encouraged you, have helped you to move forward. And that's what we want to do in our colleges, to say, you know, whatever you're going to do, we support you, and look to see what people need, because no matter what you take as your occupation or what you do, there's a chance for you to pay forward the consciousness, what you got from the world and from each other, and to raise that awareness so that it becomes a way of life. And I would just hate it to think that our colleges would close, that our high schools would close. Because this is where you develop out from your home, but you develop from the outside world a sense of you're all related to some way. And so we all, like the little kid that said, Daddy, Daddy, she said, thank you. So we say, God, thank you. And it wouldn't hurt you to help this people around, or they'll this, whatever. Now I speak, somebody say, you speak not reverently. And I said, you know, God's my friend. And some days I have to be real firm. And that's what we do with each other. And I think the college has done that. We have had DACA people, we've done all kinds of things that that I think would not have happened if we didn't have this particular person as our president, or this is a person in our college, and this is how they taught, and this is what they did. It was more than I can teach the academics. That what we wittingly or unwittingly do is we teach other people how we live, how they can live, whether they're in or out of the convent. It's not, you know, it's not about that. It's about this is what we need to do. This is our legacy. Now I say I think I'm possessed by it because I'm getting older, but that's my legacy. Very good. This is our legacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree. I think students definitely want it to continue on, especially for women. It's so important for women to be able to stand on their own. Again, that independence that I was raised, how I was raised, and the college does that for you. I mean, you have a chance to have your voice heard. You and then again, pay it forward, help your classmates, or if you receive a scholarship while you're here, plan on, if you can do that in the future to somebody else, help them, give them a step forward. And just, keep the critical concerns and the charism. That's what it's about being here. I mean, you can go anywhere to college, but you get more of a life learning here, and you have the support of all the mercies from past years. I mean, it's always said when you walk around in these buildings, just think of all the mercy that's been surrounding you, that is walking with you and helping you walk out into the world. So, and the programs here that supporting the DACA students, the Mothers Living and Learning for single moms, it's just, they really care about the people. And you're not more than a number here. You're a person. Several people that you walk down the hall will say, "Oh, hi," whoever you are. It might be the president, it might be a teacher, it might be a staff person. You're more than just a number here. You're an individual that is, blossoming. I know that was one of the code words of the college for a while, blooming, to go out into the world, and to carry on the charism and the spirit of mercy.
One of the things I know without a doubt is, had I not been a sister of mercy, I would not have done all the things that I got to do, that I was called to do, that I never thought I could do. By called, I mean, somebody said, "Would you?" And I says, "Well, I don't know if I can." And they said, "Yeah, and I was able to do it fearlessly because I was raised that way. I was raised that way. And I had people who respected that. And they said, they didn't say you're fearless. They said, "You know what, could you do this for us?" Yeah. And so I think it's because what I learned was to allow people to teach me something that I didn't know. What Tony said, "Do we have to know everything?" And I says, "No, well, you have to teach me everything you don't know." And I think of Tony often. I don't know if he's still living or not, but I think of that often because I think what he taught me was that when I doubt that if I can do that, I have to think about maybe I could, that I would search out who could teach me. And when somebody asked me about something, if I didn't know, I'd go after it and I'd find somebody who could do it for him, who could support them, who could do that. And so I think that's what, and I've learned so much from, I've learned so much for the hard things that I have in Belize when they, and not in Belize, in the Philippines when they were going to kill me because we were going to, and you know what, somebody was with me and she says, this is a matriarchal society and this one. And so, because she talked with them about what they did and how they did that, they didn't. They went away because the worst, I learned from them that they are a matriarchal society and the worst thing they could do was to shame their mothers. And they would shame their mothers who gave birth at our hospital there if they found out how they talked to us and had and whatever, So it's just, I guess it's learning and then remembering, putting it together again to say, you know what, this is how we learn to be merciful in this country. And this is how God has been merciful to you, by the way. What I wish for everybody is that they could notice and how we get that invitation to be more than we think we are, because we are a lot, because that's the way God created us. I don't know how else to say it. But I tell you the story about the Koristani Jews. What they do with the scripture, with the Torah, is that they make a story out of it. Like when we have Greek and Roman mythology, everybody had to take when I taught high school English, the whole school had to take it. Someone, because they passed through me, they took it, because I said. And it's because they wrote those stories because that was the only way they know how to tell the stories. And so when Scripture is, was written, 60 years after, 70 years after Christ died and whatever, they told it as they remembered and whatever, and they told stories about it. So what the Korestani Jews do is they take their Scripture and they put it into a story. And so they wrote the story about the death of Moses. Now you can read that in the Scripture, but this is how they told the story. I won't go you all the things, but anyway, Moses dies. And the angels say to, the Holy Ones say to the Holy One, to say to God, Creator God, why is it that you weep? This is the important part. Why is it that you weep? He says, they're going to be here with you. Why do you weep? And he says, don't you get it? I mean, they in the story it says, I weep because who will love me the way Moses did? And who will walk among my people and do good for them the way Moses did? And who will, and he gives several little things. And he says, and this is why I weep. And so the Korestani Jew says, and that is how God weeps for each of us, because each of us in this world gives them something. And God weeps because you will no longer be here to do what you do and to share what you share, even though you're going to be with God, And then there's a piece in Scripture that says, be you perfect as your Heavenly Father is perfect. When I was doing something for the wellness people, I did a little look into that. The Greek from that, it's hard to translate from one to another language because it has idioms. The translation from if you look at the Greek, it's really be you as complete in your humanness as God is complete in God's godness, which means human beings make mistakes. We make errors in judgment. We say, I should have thought differently about that. And so that's what we do. And so God loves us when we're born, and God's going to take us, we'll all be with God when we die, no matter what.